Hey, sociologists, my favourite people, community, lesson number 3, pages, pages 132 to 134. Let's do it. Okay, learning goals for today. You're going to know what socio-cultural change is, and you're going to know the effects of ICT on society. Now, there's a few notes to get through today, so I haven't put a little activity in blue. There is still a little bit of homework, which is just a content test. Anyway, let the fun begin. Okay, the effects of socio-cultural change. Sociologists now see it's better to see societies as on a continuum and able to be put into lots of categories, not just two. Yeah, so we've previously talked about dichotomy theories, Gemeinschaft versus Gesellschaft, rural, urban, blah, blah, blah. But now sociologists are saying, you're not one or the other. You're somewhere on this continuum between a Gesellschaft or Gemeinschaft, or between complex and simple, or between urban and rural, whatever. Yeah, that's a more complex and more nuanced way of looking at analysing societies. Also, community can now mean an identity or a belonging that's not linked to geography. Yeah, so way back pre-industrial revolution, community was basically where you lived. That was it. But now with the internet and so on, you can be in all kinds of communities. You don't need to be physically located near someone. Yeah, you can have a watch party with people all around the country or all around the world on YouTube, or you can interact with people on Twitch in the chat field while you're watching someone play World of Warcraft or whatever. It's your choice. Benedict Anderson, he was a man who said that communities are mental constructs. He believed that even nations were basically just imagined ideas. Yeah, there's no physical reality of a country. It's basically, we've just said, yep, that's France and that's Spain, and there's like an imaginary line in between them. Deal with it. A nice slide here. Factors of socio-cultural change. So you can write this down if you want. It's up to you. So there's a shift from rural to urban life. Yeah, that's the big story of the last century, is urbanization. You may have touched upon that in Year 8 geography, if anyone can remember back that far. The Industrial Revolution saw a move from agricultural to industrial economy. We saw the introduction of democracy, which focuses heavily on individual freedom and individuals doing whatever they want. There's competition for economic survival. Much more likely to see both parents working these days, whereas back in the day it was the male breadwinner and the woman would traditionally stay at home with the children even after they'd grown up, even after they were at school. There are greater opportunities for professional and personal enhancement these days, and as we've already mentioned, when in the move from Gemeinschaft to Gesellschaft, there's an increased participation of women in activities outside the house. Here's a dude, this is Benedict Anderson, and he said, a nation is imagined because of the members of even the smallest nation will never know most of their fellow members, meet them, or even hear of them. Yet in the minds of each lives the image of their communion. Yeah, so that's why he saw a nation as being imagined. He's the guy who said that communities are mental constructs. Yeah, communities don't need to be physical. They don't need to be geographically located together anymore. Now he wants us to bugger off so he can get back to having his ciggy. So continuing on to look at the effects of socio-cultural change. As mentioned, there's a shift away from looking at community in a geographically bound way. You don't need to live near people to be in a community with them anymore. And the definition of community has changed. So now we see a community as a network rather than at a group. Yeah. And there's fluid boundaries between them. You can be in that community and then leave it, go to another one. You can be a member of lots of different communities. Way back in rural society, how are you going to escape your community? You need them to survive. There's less hierarchy in more modern communities. It used to be very top down. The patriarchy. This guy's the boss. Then even in the workplace, you see a much more flat scale. There's a lot more equality amongst workers. And in general, bosses aren't as bossy as they used to be. If that means anything to any of you. Perhaps not. Most are in many loose partial communities. Yeah, you used to just be in one community, your local rural community or your country or whatever. Now you might be a gamer, you might be, AFL supporter, you might be in this club, that club, you're part of that nation, you're part of this family, heaps of different communities. So in a sense, everyone has their own personal community. If you imagine it as a Venn diagram, you've got all these different circles, there's all these different communities, and you are the one that overlaps. And the idea there being that, no one else is a member of the exact same communities as you, which makes your community experience personal to you. Fun. So people move away from community based on kinship to a community based on choice. And to oversimplify, a community based on family, you don't choose your family, you just get lumped with them when you're born. Whereas your friends, in person and online, you choose who they are. So here's a nice simple graphic showing you what communities as networks look like. Yeah, so here's the different communities. Every dot is a person, and a blue line is a connection between two people. And so within each community, you've got a lot of connections, but then you've got connections between the communities as well. Except if you're in community 5, you've got no mates. This is a really interesting graphic I drummed up. It's a bit old, but it shows internet patterns. So this is the internet. This is like internet traffic between various places in the world. So as you'll notice there, North America and Europe, there's a heap of traffic within them and between them, and then a little bit from the rest of the world. And you can see Australia down there in the bottom right hand corner. Go team! So just a couple more differences between the Gesellschaft and Gemeinschaft, and then we're going to move on to ICT and its impact. So in Gesellschaft, rights are clearly defined. Yeah, so Gesellschaft is like the big city society. Your rights are clearly defined. You've got that role, you've got that role. In Gemeinschaft, mine, in your own little community there, your obligation to your nearest and dearest is total. Yeah. So just imagine, like, a simple way of looking at that is comparing your obligations to your work as compared to your family. Like most parents would die to protect their children without question, whereas would you die to protect something that's going on at your workplace? Doubt it. Booyah. Another nice little summary of the differences there. Gemeinschaft, examples of Gemeinschaft are neighbourhoods, church groups, co-workers, social clubs. Gesellschaft, governments, businesses, corporations, and cities. And here's some definitions here. So we're just talking around in circles here, but Gemeinschaft, yeah, relations are based on homogenous, relatively similar culture. They're intimate, informal, cooperative. Everyone's obligated to each other morally, and you see them typically in pre-industrial societies. Gesellschaft, you see relations are more formal, goal-oriented, heterogeneous, meaning different, based on self-interest, competition, complex division of labour, yeah. So everybody does one tiny little thing, which together makes a society function, and these relationships are typical of industrial societies. Okay, our next little topic here within this lesson is the impact of ICT. That's information and communications technology. That's your phone, your computer, the internet, stuff like that. So communities have always been responding to changes in the environment. Yeah. So when plows came along, that made a change. When the internet came along, it made a huge change. So yeah. Definition of ICT there, as we know, yada yada yada. So it's expanded the possibilities of community. Yeah, I mean, just think about the lockdown. If you didn't have ICT you'd been forced to live in your own house for 8 weeks, just with your parents, or maybe they're out at work and just there by yourself, probably would have gone stark raving mad, but because you had the internet, you could watch other people doing stuff and you could connect with people via social media. So, as we've discussed already, ICT has made us change the definition of community. I'm going to show you a little brainstorm here. Okay, check this out. So, the impact of ICT in society, should say impact of ICT, not on ICT in the middle there. So there are some. There's impacts on law, impacts on communication, impacts on the economy, impacts on access to ICT, and impacts on education. So what kind of impacts on education? Online learning, students can work from home, revision at home, yeah. Impacts on the economy, yeah, you can do a lot of online shopping, and so physical shops are closing down, which means a loss for... there's also a loss of work at supermarkets because of, for example, self-checkouts, yeah, that's ICT. That's networks and computers that do the checking out for you. You just have to make the beep sound. Yeah. It also leads to some inequality. Yeah. There's not, I mean, as many of you will have experienced over the last few weeks, how good your internet is at home makes a big difference as to how well you can access your online community friends. If your internet sucks and you can't get a stream going to have a Zoom call or house party or whatever, then your access to your online communities is limited. And so now something that has come out of that lockdown is the idea that the internet is now basically a necessity, just like electricity, gas, and water. You know, these days, to live in modern society, the internet is another necessity, just like power and water. Okay, this is the last slide of notes, I promise. So, there are positives and negatives of the impact of information and communications technology, ICT. You can use that abbreviation. If you use it as in a response, just make sure the first time you say it, put in brackets, information and communication technology. Anytime you use an acronym, the first time that you use it in your piece of writing, you need to define it in brackets, and then you can just use the acronym after that. If you never define the acronym, the person reading it doesn't know that you know what it actually means. You've got to prove it to them, yeah? Assume the person reading it doesn't know anything and you're trying to prove to them that you do know stuff. Okay, so some of the positives of ICT. You can have small, that should say niche groups, not nice groups, that's lovely, but small niche groups, yeah? You can have lots of small groups and everyone can find their tribe, yeah? On the internet, whatever weird thing you're into, you're going to be able to find thousands of other people who are into that as well. Yay! Some negatives. It weakens traditional social bonds, and despite the possibility that social media brings people together, it does reduce face-to-face contact between people. The time spent in hours per week of people face-to-face has been dropping for decades, and that main reason is because of ICT, probably overwork as well. Yeah. Just think about your phone, right? Here's my phone. If you want to contact me on my phone, then you message me, or you WhatsApp me, or you Snapchat me, or you email me, or you text me. But the last thing you do is phone me. Okay, some negative and positive effects of computers, ICT, and the individual. So, negative effects: addicted to the internet, addicted to games, less socializing and being lazier. Some positive effects: more work can be done in less time. Yeah, increases productivity. It allows more access to services. So think about people living in rural communities. They can use the internet to have face-to-face conversations with nurses and doctors, for example, or they can do online learning. Yeah, they don't have to physically be located in Melbourne or Sydney to do a university course anymore. They can do it online. And obviously a huge point there is that information is at your user's fingertips. Pretty much the entire store of all human knowledge is available on your phone just by asking Google. Sweet. I said there wouldn't be an activity, but I lied. Should be easy though. I just want you to list 3 positives and 3 negatives of the increase in ICT use. So the increase in the use of computers, phones, all that sort of carry on, the internet. I want you to give me 3 examples that are good and bad of your own ideas. Don't just repeat what you saw on the last slide. Yay. Right, here's a video from a dude talking about the impacts of technology on society. Do it.
Hi, welcome to our first use of presentme.com. Present.me is a website on the internet we're using to do screencasting. Technology can provide us with many improvements, but it can also create undesirable consequences. Whether technology has positive or negative consequences depends on how we use it. We've talked about a paradigm shift before. Paradigm is your view of reality and how you judge and evaluate things. Paradigms change because of technology. An example being that we used to have to print in newspapers and magazines and radio if we wanted to communicate with people. And today we can post something on the internet and it appears there within just a few minutes and millions of people can see it. Technology has changed very quickly over time, over the recent time. Up until the Industrial Revolution, very little technology changed, and because we didn't have a lot to work with. Technology builds on itself. So it's grown exponentially in the last 150 years, and it's growing very quickly today. We're going to talk about quickly the leisure time, impacts on medical technology and how that changes our lives, impacts on education, occupations, and society. Materialism. The idea of materialism was kind of odd, that we had to actually learn to be materialistic and to want to buy new things all the time. If you went back 100 years, before the Industrial Revolution and before World War I and II, people hung on to things a lot longer, and things were intended to stick around and be used and handed down to other generations. Today we have learned to replace things quickly, and that things wear out, and that we want to buy new things all the time. The mass production in the Industrial Revolution created mass consumption in our society that we have today. Early adopters are the people that want to have the first technology when it first comes out, so that they can show other people, and plus they just really enjoy new technologies. The problem with being an early adopter is that you're a person that usually ends up with a piece of technology that has some of the errors because it's early in production, and it's also very expensive to buy technology when it's brand new. We used to think, I believe, that a successful person was intelligent, educated, had good character, and I think today if you ask my students what marks a successful person, they list off the things that person owns. What sort of technologies that they purchased in their home and their car and those kind of things. So I think there's been a change in our society. Definitely a loss of face-to-face interaction. We spend a lot of time looking at a computer screen. Ironic that I'm doing that right now. And using instant messaging and communicating with our technology, but not actually talking to people face-to-face. So we have somewhat of a loss of social interaction, and people are more uncomfortable in social situations. It's been discussed that we have a shortage of our attention span, that we like to multitask. I asked my students today what they wanted, what they'd have running on their computer, and they said, I'd have on YouTube, and I'll have on iTunes, and I'll be playing a game, and all along with that, I'll be trying to do my homework on the computer at the same time. So when we divide our attention amongst a lot of things, our brain really gets used to having lots of things happening and jumping from one thing to another, and it makes it harder for us to concentrate. Occupational impacts. Technology changes our careers and jobs a great deal. It's said that in the future we'll have to change jobs more often. As services and technologies change, at least you will have to be retrained in order to do your own job. Telecommuting. At least one day a week, many people spend at home doing their work for their job through the internet, emailing and writing and processing information. Another occupational impact, something that's changed, the paradigm that's changed over the years, is the surveillance that goes on in our occupations, that there are video cameras and they are monitoring what you're doing on the internet and keeping an eye on where you're located based on GPSs, and if you're driving a truck, they know where you're at. Things have changed, no loss of privacy from that. The loss of high-paying, low-skilled jobs, being able to get a job in a factory when you got out of school that gave you a middle-class income. Automation, we still have a lot of mass production in our country, but it's automated, so the manufacturing jobs don't require very many people to work at them. So it's no longer an easy way to get a job working in a factory. If we went back into the 1950s, the majority of people in our country worked in manufacturing. Another reason for the reduction in the number of people in manufacturing is global competition. Because we have the technology to travel and communicate with the rest of the world so quickly, we can produce things in one part of the world and trade them with another part of the world and have a more cost-effective means of producing technology. But that means that people in other countries that don't want to be paid as much as us are willing to work for less, and the jobs leave our country. Our leisure time. Technology really affects our leisure time a great deal. We don't really realize it, but we spend a lot of time playing video games and using the internet and text messaging and watching television. I read an article today that said that we don't exercise less. It's only about 8% of people exercise really regularly. But one thing that's changed is that a lot of people sit down a lot longer. They spend more time in a chair, like I am right now, using a computer, and rather than being more active. You know, with the home now being a place to work, it's kind of hard to divide your leisure time from your work time. It used to be at work was work, and when you went home you could relax. But now you can be working at home like I am. Does it save us labor? Well, technology says it saves us a lot of labor, but I think it also makes things, it gives us more time to do more work. You know, we can accomplish something quickly and then we move on to another job. So I don't know if it's given us a whole lot of more free time. We talked a little bit today in class about does technology help or hurt sports, and how does it affect it. And it was pretty interesting that sometimes it becomes a test more of the sporting equipment from one manufacturer compared to another than the athletic ability of one person to another. Unless there's a big standardization of the technology, there's a competition between the companies that produce the equipment as well as the people. Impacts on our health and biological impacts. A recent thing is the idea in the last 15 or 20 years of cloning humans and animals. One thing they found out is that when they clone animals, a lot of times the clone is not as healthy as a natural animal. And of course we haven't done any human cloning yet, but the potential in the future is very scary. People don't like the idea of that for obvious reasons. We've increased our lifespan with technology and with biomedical technology, but brings up some other issues that, we're less mobile, we may have mental health issues when we're older, we may not be able to support ourselves and save enough money to last well into our old age where we can't work and pay for things. The idea of genetic manipulation to create replacement parts and is kind of an interesting concept. I was told today that when babies are born at the hospital, they ask you if you want to save some of the stem cells from the baby that could be used for that person later on when they're older for potential genetic therapy and things. Robotic surgery, kind of a spooky idea being operated on by a robot, but usually they're being controlled by a human being on the other end, and the technology allows the person to be more accurate and operate in a smaller space and cause less damage than they would operating with their hands. The concept of the genetic manipulation of our offspring, the ability to understand the DNA and manipulate that to choose whether you want to have a boy or a girl, or to change the characteristics of your children, is kind of an interesting thought, with a little bit spooky too, but the idea is that it's probably going to happen at some time. That technology will be available. This is an interesting slide. This company is no longer in business, but at one point they were offering cloned cats for $32,000. I believe you could bring your own cat in and have it cloned, but they had to turn a lot of people away who thought the cat would have the same personality, and they had to tell them it'll only look like the other cat. I don't know why the company went under, but it seems a little bit like a waste of money to me. Technology and education, this is a kind of an area near and dear to my heart, as most of my students know. My first question, does Facebook turn college students into terrible writers? I think if you think about it, proper grammar isn't followed when we're texting, tweeting, instant messaging. A lot of my students write without capitalizing and with spelling errors and things, because the whole idea is to get their point across when they're using Facebook. That may be a problem when you need to do professional communications or do writing in college or research. Does Google make you stupid? There's a lot of articles online, and if you look at this video on our Google Docs attached to our calendar, you'll be able to go to the links in it. The idea is that Google puts the most often chosen search result at the top of the screen. So we always click on the first search result, and by that we're reinforcing that search result as being the one that other people are going to see first too. And we never read deeper and find out more information about the topic other than that first reply. So it's easy to find information, but we don't get a broad knowledge of it. We just get that one website. So in a way, it doesn't make us learn as much as we could. Are we distracted to learn? Too distracted to learn? Are there too many things going on? It's kind of interesting that the amount of multitasking and the use of technology. I often find my students they're trying to play with their cell phone or pulling out an iPod or playing with something on the table that I've lost them in just a few minutes. And I think that the use of all those technologies and the shorter attention span makes it harder to teach. One of the reasons we're trying the internet as to flip our classroom and see if you can watch a video online. Sometimes you really just need to concentrate on something to get all of it instead of using 10 or 20% of your time on it. Is technology good in the classroom? Well, that's good and bad. Technology has a great deal of potential in the classroom, but it has a terrible history. The first thing we did was have games where students would shoot aliens for 5 minutes and then do some math work for a couple seconds and then shoot aliens again. Where in the world's Carmen Sandiego, right? Or the one about going out west, where people would trade in everything they had in their wagon to buy bullets so they could participate in the hunting part of the game. It doesn't have a good history. Technology should be applied for manipulation of data more than for gaming like that. But it has goods and bads, and how you use it is important. You shouldn't use it, hopefully, to cheat with. Technology makes it very easy to exchange information, and the goal is to learn as much as we can, not to get the best grade we can. So students have the ability now to use Facebook and instant messaging and to communicate with each other in ways that they couldn't before, making it difficult for teachers to really assess how much the student has learned. As a final discussion, the output of any technology is going to be either expected or unexpected, and it's going to be either good or bad. I mean, we design technology for expected and desired results, but we also get undesirable things that happen and unexpected things that take place. So you have to think about what you're using in information technology and modern technologies and how they're going to impact your life, and make decisions yourself. Everybody needs to make their own. Thanks for listening. Drop me an email if you watched this.
Your reflection activity today, it's going to be another SWOT analysis. So, with the idea being the increase of ICT use, just give me one dot point, draw that grid up. I want one strength, one weakness, one opportunity, and one threat. Here comes the fun part. It's homework. Yes. You just need to go to that link there, bit.ly/sociology quiz 11. Yes, can you believe it? This is our 11th content test. Go there, and I want you to keep doing that until you can get 100%. Yeah, it's a little bit of rote learning. Suck it up. For those of you that are keen as beans, a little bit of bonus homework for you. Highly recommend that you always read the relevant section from the SCV textbook. That's 132 to 134. I've already given you the notes, bros. And also check this out. This is really cool. It's like a 10-minute long TED Talk called The Social and Political Implications of Technology. Really helpful to give you just a deeper background knowledge about this topic. There's the link, bit.ly/tech impacts. Thank you so much for taking part in today's lesson. And don't forget to keep it real.